بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين اللهم إني نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So we continue with the Imām now mentioning something about the or something from the wisdom of Sayyidina Luqman alayhi salam on page 23, 22, 23 of the English translation. أيها الولد روي في وصايا لقمان الحكيم لابنه أنه قال يا بني لا يكونن الديك أكيس منك ينادي بالأسحار وأنت نائم. That, O child, in the advice of Luqman the wise that he gave his son, it is related that he said, my son, do not ever let the rooster, as we said last week, do not let the rooster be more canny than yourself. In other words, more smarter than you. Don't let the rooster be smarter than you. Why? Because he calls out before daybreak while you are sleeping. In other words, what's the idea here? That the rooster wakes up before wakes up at the time of Fajr. Why are you letting an animal precede you in the thing that you should be preceding it? So don't let it be that the rooster is waking you up. You should be going out there and saying, the rooster hasn't woken up yet. So don't let the rooster be smarter than you. And then he mentions a couple of lines of poetry. وَلَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ مَنْ قَالَ شِعْرًا. He says, لَقَدْ هَتَفَتْ فِي جُنْحِ لَيْلِ حَمَامًا عَلَى فَنَنٍ وَهْنًا وَإِنِّي لَنَائِمٌ. A dove moaned frailly in the dark one night on a branch while I was sleeping. كذبت وبيت الله لو كنت عاشقا لما سبقتني بالبكاء الحمائم. I have lied by Allah's house. Were I a lover, then doves wouldn't beat me in weeping. وأزعم أني هائم ذو صبابة لربي فلا أبكي وتبكي البهائم. I claim that I am mad with love, fervent with longing for my Lord, yet I do not weep and such animals are weeping. So what the idea here is that how can it be that animals precede us? In both what Sayyidina Luqman has said and these few lines of poetry, how is it possible that animals have superseded us, preceded us, are engaging in actions that we should be engaging in? Because we as human beings have this immense gift of speech. We can talk and we can articulate and we can say things. But the problem that's coupled with that is the fact that we tend to say things that we don't do. Or we tend to say things we don't really believe in. That's why there has to be a distinction between what we say and what we actually believe. We have to take a pause. That's why if you think about all the wise people in any human tradition, in any civilization, they all say the same thing. Be careful what you say. Think before you speak. Be people of few words. Don't just blurt out what comes to your mind. This is because we shouldn't be people that are quick in just claiming and saying. People of actions are people of few words. And even the words that they do say are powerful. Why? Because when look at Luqman al-Hakim. Luqman al-Hakim alayhi salam, there's a difference of opinion. Was he a prophet or not in our tradition? Difference of opinion. But nonetheless, we do know that whether he was a prophet or not, he was a wise person, because he's referred to as Luqman al-Hakim. Now, if you look at the word Hakim, someone who's a wise individual, it comes from the word in Arabic, hakama. And hakama means to pass judgment. It could be about anything. I could say, it is raining right now. So I'm saying something which factually true, as in it is now. It's raining, I think it is. Or other more complicated things. The idea being is that when you say something about something else, you want to make sure that the thing that you're saying is correct. So pretend I said to you right now, it's dark. And I said, what a lovely morning this is. In other words, and if I believe that, the judgment that I've made is incorrect, isn't it? It could either be because I'm mistaken, or la samah Allah, it's because someone's not telling the truth. Either way, it's incorrect. It doesn't correspond to the way something actually is. Now imagine you look at all the things that you see occurring in your life. You have a choice. You can either say things as you see them, or you can say things as they aren't actually. Which one is it going to be? Or somewhere in the middle, you're not too sure. Right? Now, to move toward the side where you're saying things that are actually the case, that would basically mean that you don't say much. Beyond purely factual things and things that you know for certain, or things that are certain, where do we know they're certain from? From deen. Everything the Prophet ﷺ has told us, we're certain about it. Everything the Quran tells us, we're certain about it. So as long as our words are mirrors and reflections of the Quran and Hadith, we know that the things that we are saying are from the pool of certainty. But when we move away from that into where the grey areas are, we're moving away from being certain. Now, what's interesting about the word Hakim then, it's about, it comes from the word to judge something to be the case. Ordinarily what happens is that human beings, wisdom comes upon them when they reach old age. But that type of wisdom is oftentimes accompanied by some kind of regret. What's the regret? I've reached old age and I've only now come to realize these things. So wisdom has essentially come to you, right? The true sense of wisdom is when you understand these judgments that you're meant to be making, the things that you're meant to be saying, and you recognize that the only true certain things in my life and in existence are the things which Allah and His Messenger say, so it's better that I stick on that side of things. So what you're then doing is that you are bringing forward the fact of wisdom in your young age. You are coming to wisdom as opposed to wisdom hitting you as a result of old age. And that's why then a person in deen is referred to as a Shaykh. Because a Shaykh in Arabic just means someone who's old, right? But sometimes you can have someone very young who's a Shaykh, because the idea is that they have placed themselves far, far ahead of any life experience that they've had. Right? So I'll give you an example. Some people will learn only by doing it. No matter what you tell them, they're just not going to listen to you, and they're going to unfortunately come to learn by life's experiences. But other people, they will see, okay, what are the potential consequences of me doing this, that, or the other? And then they will weigh it up and they'll realize that I should either do this or I should stay away from this. People who are able to do that, what they're doing is that they are becoming wiser through reflection. So you're using this beautiful gift of being able to reflect to get to the stage of being wise in an age where it doesn't ordinarily come to you. Because it's a really odd thing, can you imagine in English you call someone old man? Because that's what Shaykh is. Right? It's almost semi-disrespectful to refer to someone being older than what they are. But in our tradition, it's understood that no, it's a mark of clear thinking. It's a mark of wisdom. It's a mark of maturity. It's a mark of someone who's allowed themselves the gift that's given to them, and they've come to these conclusions such that they've implemented them in their own lives, and they're allowed to act as exemplars and examples for people around them. Now, if you look at Luqman alayhi salam, you know, the fact that he is Hakim, we know that he in this in these pages here, in this book, he's telling his son that don't let animals be smarter than you are. But we also know that in Surah Luqman in the Quran, what are the pieces of advice that Luqman alayhi salam gives his son? Because he begins by, he gives him these, it's beautiful if you think about it, that in these few verses, a summary of what we should impart to our children is included in these verses. And what's the first thing that we're told? وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ. That the first thing that we're being told here is that, and we have enjoined on man to be dutiful and good to his parents. Right? Of course, prior to that, the ayah actually begins by saying, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانَ لِابْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ. That Luqman is telling his son while he is admonishing him, giving him advice, giving him counsel. يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ. Right? Don't associate any partners with Allah. إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. That joining others in worship with Allah is a great wrong. So the first thing is, don't join anyone with another. Everything revolves around Tawheed. Everything. But as we see in the Quran, the parents are always mentioned, their obedience, immediately after Allah's Tawheed. And it ties into what we said last week, that there's a great wisdom in this, because being obedient to your parents is a stepping stone to being obedient to Allah. And so the next piece of advice, after affirming Allah's oneness, is to be obedient to one's parents, but within the team that we refer to as parents, the mother and the father, the mother is specifically singled out. حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ. That the mother carries a child through immense tests, difficulties. وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْن. Right? Doesn't mention, it's specifically about the mother here. وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ. And it's so amazing how the Quran, how Allah Azza wa Jal mentions these different stages in literally one line. Parents, mother, and then the child should be weaned at the age of 2. That's what it says. وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ. And the child should be weaned at the age of 2. One line. It's the conciseness of the words of Allah is incredible. And then by mentioning the idea, the fact of being obedient to our parents, that the mother carries a child through these great tribulations and tests, and that weaning is at the age of 2, anashkur li wali walidayk. So be thankful and grateful to me, and be thankful and grateful to your parents. Wa ilayya al-masir, because you're returning to me. And then there are many other things which we see Luqman alayhi salam advising his son. We'll mention just one more. Ya bunayya innaha intaku mithqala habbatin min khardal. O my son, if there be anything equal to the weight of a grain of a mustard seed, fi sakhratin, aw fi samawat, and it might be this grain, there's mustard, you can't even see it if it was here. And this grain of mustard seed might be in a rock somewhere. Aw fi samawat, or it might be suspended in the heavens. Right? Or أو في الأرض, or it may be somewhere in the earth, يأتي بها الله, Allah will bring it forth. What are we being told here? That part of knowing Allah's great names and attributes and majestic attributes, part of knowing these names and these attributes is to understand what it means when Allah says Allah Alim, Allah knows. Because if you just, let's say, if we were able to even for 30 seconds or for 1 minute think about all the things that we're doing and thinking about and intending and not intending, the fact that every aspect of that Allah knows. But what's more is, it's not just that Allah knows that, He knows the hidden motives that even you are not fully aware of about yourself. Right? So because sometimes, when you think about why you do things, you're being pushed toward doing, or you're pushing yourself to do something, and you're not entirely sure, why am I being pushed towards doing, why am I leading myself to do that? But because there's been a whole series of consequences of, things that are, this is a consequence of, that has led you to this stage. But we're not even aware of that. We don't even recognize, how did we get to doing this action and what were the preceding steps? And so all of these hidden motivations, the things that we do know, the things that we don't know about ourselves, Allah knows all of them. Now you combine that for every single thing in existence. La ilaha illallah. It's unfathomable really to a limited human mind to understand what it means when we say Allahu al-Alim. Right now, every individual and that's existed, exists, will exist, Allah is aware and knowing in the most perfect and most complete way, down to the minutest details. If we just reflect on that, it's an unfolding of Allah's knowledge that's taking place really in existence, right? And so what's Luqman alayhi salam telling his son? He's telling his son, then have taqwa. The least that you can do then, even though it's a really high maqam, is to have taqwa of Allah, to know that Allah is watching you. We're told in other traditions, and it's mentioned in the books, how Allah knows the crawling of a black ant on a black stone on a moonless night. Right? Meaning it's not even perceptible, you can't even see that. And so these are reminders for us and for how we're meant to teach our children. This is how you build your life. Because if you tell adults who've never heard that message, it takes a bit of, boxing it into us type of thing. You have to really drill it again and again and again and again. But if we teach our children this from the youngest age and keep reminding them, as we spoke about last week, it will create a frame in their mind that, subhanAllah, Allah does know what I'm doing. And if they, and that, Imam Ghazālī says this, if they kind of start going a little bit, let's say, not off the path, but they maybe, not where they're meant to be, those ideas will bring them back. Those ideas will make them realize at some stage, as we all, tabarakallah, we remember the things our parents said to us when we were growing up. Unfortunately, sometimes we remember them when we get old. We realize, subhanAllah, my parents did tell me this. Why did I not listen? Now, so that's, and tabarakallah, there's many other bits of advice here that the Imam, Luqman alayhi salam mentions. Then Imam Ghazālī says, أيها الولد خلاصة العلم أن تعلم الطاعة والعبادة ما هي. That the essence of knowledge, O child, is to know what obedience and worship actually are. What is worship? What is obedience? وَلْيُعْلَمْ أن الطاعة والعبادة متابعة الشارع في الأوامر والنواهي بالقول والفعل. That know that obedience and worship are conformity to the sacred law, with respect to commands and prohibitions in both word and deed. Now, a few things here. In fact, let me just finish the passage. يعني كل ما تقول وتفعل وتترك يكون باقتداء الشرع. That is, all that you say and do, or do not do should be following the paradigm of the law. In other words, you should be following the Sharia. كما لو صمت يوم العيد وأيام التشريق تكون عاصيا. Such that were you to fast on a day of Eid and the days of Tashriq, you would be a rebel. You know, you'll be sinner. You can't, it's haram to fast on Eid. Which Sharia are you following? Because if you say, no, I want to be engaged in more piety, I'm going to fast on a day of Eid. That's not Sharia. Sharia forbids us from fasting on a day of Eid. أو صليت في ثوب مغصوب وإن كانت صورة عبادة تأثم. Or if you prayed in a garment which you had unlawfully acquired, though there is the appearance of worship, you are actually sinning. In other words, if you had a garment, there's some difference of opinion about this, whether your prayer is valid or not. But the point that the Imām is trying to say is that outwardly you're praying, but really you've got on clothes that are stolen or usurped, right? So you're outwardly in an act of worship, but inwardly you've engaged in an act of theft, and hence you're sinning. Now, a few things we can say here. Firstly, that ibadah, sometimes we can limit our understanding of ibadah just to the prayer, or just to Sawm, to fasting, or just to Hajj. When we think of ibadah, the things that come into our mind are these things: Salah, Sawm, Zakah, Hajj. But what we should keep in mind is that ibadah is really a manifestation of ubudiyah, of slavehood. Because ibadah and ubudiyah, they have the same root word. You're an abd, a slave. And an abd engages in ibadah, i.e. acts of slavehood. I know we call them acts of worship, but they are really acts of slavehood. And the state that we're in, or should be in, is the state of ubudiyah, the state of slavehood. Now, ubudiyah is for one to be in a state of slavehood. We can make it a bit clear. For example, when we're hungry, we're in a state of being, aren't we? It's not that we're hungry and somehow we can turn that state on and off at the flick of a button. No, you're hungry, you're in a state now. Whether you're in this room, the next room, in your car, wherever you may be, that state will accompany you wherever you may be until you eat, and that you are now removing yourself from that state. Or if we know something, we say that we're in a state of knowledge. Wherever we go, that state will accompany us. You can't leave it behind anywhere. Right? Likewise, ubudiyah is being is a state of being. It's supposed to occupy us wherever we go. It's supposed to be with us wherever we are. If we're in the prayer, if we're in fasting, Hajj, Zakat, they're the most obvious places that we can see the manifestations of ubudiyah. But ubudiyah is 24 hours a day. Ubudiyah is from the moment that we reach the age of being responsible till the day that we leave this world. And the way that we can actualize that ubudiyah is knowing what we're meant to do in the times that we occupy in the day. So someone may say, how can you have ubudiyah when you're sleeping? Because you're not even, you're aware of anything. Because when you lay down to sleep, you say, Allah, I'm sleeping for you. Right? Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya. Oh Allah, in your name I sleep, and in your name, in fact it's, oh Allah, in your name do I live and die. Right? And when you wake up in the morning, you say Alhamdulillah to Allah that He brought you back from essentially death. So what you've done is that period of sleep, you've now made it into an act of ibadah. And your ubudiyah accompanies you throughout those hours of sleep. And then we can see, okay, well, how about around the times of ibadah, which we sometimes think of as being salah, etc., when we're at work? What's one of the ways, or some of the ways that we can, in our work life, make ubudiyah manifest? Sometimes we go into workplaces, our workplaces, and we hear discussions around, my work is really hard for it's, I'm not sure how easy it is to practice deen, etc. But when you reflect on that and think, okay, what can I do to manifest my ubudiyah onto the situation that I'm in, rather than looking at what the situation is. So for example, someone works for any particular company or organization, and let's say it's an organization that's non-Muslim, especially in these lands. Why would we expect them, just by fact of you walking into their office, to say, oh, here comes a Muslim, I should make a wudu place for him, I should make a prayer space for that person, I should make sure that we have halal food in the canteen, and all manner of different things, right? Why should they do that? So what we're expecting is for them to give us a hand with our ubudiyah, rather than saying, okay, I find myself in this situation, how can I bring my ubudiyah to this situation? Because if you think about what you're requiring of your immediate acts of worship, you just need a small space. It could be, even if it is a broom cupboard. Sometimes they gave me a broom cupboard. You say, Tabarakallah, they gave me a space. Not to complain that they only gave me a broom cupboard. That broom cupboard can be the moment of khalwa for you. So what we're doing is that we're recognizing that we can bring our ubudiyah to the workplace. But that's just one aspect of ubudiyah in the workplace. What other aspects are there? Well, one of the ways that we can bring ubudiyah to the workplace is manifesting prophetic character. Rather than being people, meaning, work sometimes, you have to literally have it ingrained into your contract. I'm not doing this and I'm doing that. It's written down to the finest detail. What's expected of you and what you're not required to do. Why? Because people can possibly take advantage of you and make you do things that you're not meant to. But we should, in one sense, rise above that. Because why? We want to show them the beauty of collegiality. I'm a colleague of yours, don't worry, I'll help you do something. It might not be part of my job description, but I'll do it for you anyway. Right? Someone might say, but how about if people take advantage of you? Listen, I'm not interested in what people are saying or not. I am doing it because I believe this is correct. You can flip that way of thinking completely around and say to yourself, Tabarakallah, so many people are giving me these opportunities to earn more reward. As opposed to seeing it as, so many people are taking advantage of my good nature. Because truly good-natured people don't think like that. They think about, these are opportunities to do good. So what we're doing then is we're saying that in our workplace, we're bringing opportunities to manifest ubudiyah. As we said, it's a state of being, isn't it? Let's say you own a business, right? Now, what's a way of manifesting ubudiyah in our business? In the modern world, we tend to buy and sell based on the idea of pure profit, the bottom line. If you ever speak to an accountant and your accounts are worse off this year than they were last year, they'll start questioning you. What are you doing? An accountant, it's really strange, isn't it? The accountant is muhasib, in Arabic, it's like a really honorable state, that you're taking yourself to account. So the accountant is accounting you on your financial performance of your business. An accountant doesn't ever ask you, did you treat your clients well? Did you look at the correct way of conducting your business? Even if doing the correct way means there's a detriment to your bottom line. So for instance, you're selling sugar, wheat, whatever it may be, and someone comes into your stall, into your shop, wants to buy. Are you selling them the product and being nice to them because you think me being nice to them will make them come back? It's called customer service. Or are you being nice to them because they are a human being, and that's called deen? The things that you're doing are the same, but the intentions for which you're doing them are different. Because you're not concerned whether that individual comes back. You treated them the way that you know that a human being should be treated, which is with dignity, respect. And then we have to see the products that we're selling. Because one of the hardest things to do when you're a business person is to be completely upright and honest in the products, the wares that you have, the things that you're giving people. Because you'll always, because you know a potential defect in the things that, any good that you might have. Right? Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, had, as you know, he used to sell garments, and he had a garment which he knew was defective. And he left his goods to someone to sell, and he said, but if someone comes to buy this garment, let them know that it's defective. So when someone came to buy that garment, the person forgot to tell them about its defect, and he sold it. When he found out about this, all the money that was acquired by the sale of that garment, he gave it away. Right? This is the same Abu Hanifa who, if he would loan someone money and they built a wall with it, he would never sit in the shade of that wall because he'd think that's interest. This is how people think. Right? So what we can see then is that to be upright in our transactions and our businesses is a manifestation of ubudiyah. And we have to be really mindful that, but what's the reward for it? The reward is that you are raised amongst the shuhada. Just by being an upright business person. Just by being mindful. Now, what are certain other consequences of this? As Muslims, we should certainly consider that take cornflakes. Not picking on cornflakes, just came to my mind. How do we know that the cornflakes that we eat is ultimately healthy for us? With all of the additives and preservatives and the sugar, artificial sugar and all these different... How do we know it's healthy for us? And there have been no long-term studies on this. How do we know, by analogy then, any food that's processed, well now they are finding out, aren't they? Right? That is actually healthy for us. Why am I saying this? Because let's say it was a Muslim who was doing that. Should we not be conscious of the fact that we are sending out into the world products that may, la samahallah, be detrimental to human beings? That's why our trade is a trade that's vested with ethics. It's vested with a proper way of doing things. In other words, it's vested or supposed to be with ubudiyah. So what we can see is that a 24-hour cycle can be truly filled with ubudiyah in your workplace, whether you have your own business or whether you work for someone, when you come home and you are with your family, and when you retire to go to bed at night. That entire 24-hour cycle is fused with ubudiyah. And after a while, it just becomes second nature. That's the type of person that you become. Ubudiyah is a true... That's why, when the commentators, they say that one of the descriptions that Allah Azza wa Jal uses to describe the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran is abd, is a slave. Right? When you look at it through this prism, one of its meanings is that someone who has fully recognized and understands and is living according to the meaning of being a slave. You then realize that, tabarakallah, to be called an abd from Allah it's one of the highest things that we can see. Right? That's when Allah Azza wa Jal refers to as Ya ibadallah, oh my slaves. It's a huge statement in that sense. Now, so that's one thing. The other thing is the Imam is telling us here that what's the amount of knowledge that one needs to acquire. In other words, khulasatul ilmi an ta'lam, that the essence of knowledge is to know what obedience and worship are. Right? So what the Imam is telling us here is that the amount that you need to acquire or to learn is so that you can firstly understand and be clear what exactly is ibadah and what exactly is obedience. Those two things are the first two things. What is ibadah and what is obedience? And once you've learnt those, the next step is to then learn, to reflect deeply on the deeper meanings of ibadah. It's a crucial idea. Why? Because knowledge isn't something that's sought for itself. You don't want to learn just for the sake of learning. You learn something for a particular purpose. And the greatest purpose that you can engage in relation to knowledge is to learn how to worship Allah properly. That's why, if you think about it, the commentators say this, that then certain people will go on to become scholars and look at the minute details of all the sciences, the proofs of language, the proofs in theology, and so on. But really, if you look at the level of knowledge that everyone requires, it's not specific just for the scholars. Everyone has to have it, at the very least. And what's the least form of knowledge that you have to have? Well, we need to learn what is ibadah and what is being obedient. And that the very essence of obedience and worship is to follow the path set out by sacred law. There is no... one thing we have to keep in mind here is that sacred law is a worldview. It's not a set of rules. It's very important that we're clear on that. Sacred law is a worldview. And the reason why it's important to understand that is because when we encounter other worldviews or ways of living your life, we need to understand it's not about incorporating or aligning to. It's understanding, are they something which is amenable to our deen or not? Because it's our deen that teaches us. Now what's the framework? What's the worldview of the Sharia? The worldview of the Sharia is that you are here for a purpose. And that purpose is to worship Allah, to come to know Allah, and to prepare for the journey. That's the reason we're here. Now, within that, we're also then given the tools and the things that we need to be able to fulfill that purpose. Let's pretend now, so I'll give an example here. If we didn't have the Sharia, la samahallah, it's just an idea that the Imam speak about. Imam Ghazālī mentioned this in one of his books. He says, if we didn't have the Sharia, if we were just left to our own intellects, he said, it would stand to reason that every human being, or most human beings, would be vegetarian. Why? He said, because eventually everyone will come to the conclusion that it's actually evil to kill animals so that we can eat them. So it's actually an entirely sensible position to take for someone who doesn't have any framework of deen to conclude it's not a great thing to kill animals just so that we can eat them, and so vegetarianism is a good idea. But what does the Imam say? He says that's if you were just leaving an individual to their own intellect. But then the Sharia comes, and what does it tell us? It tells us that you have a worldview, and in that worldview, animals are subservient. They have been put here by Allah. They didn't just come out of space and they somehow got here. Allah put them here, and He put them here to serve us. And one of the greatest acts of sacrifice is to sacrifice the animals on Eid al-Adha. So now what we're seeing is that something that a human being, independent of revelation, might conclude, the Sharia is telling us, no, the better way is this. Why? Because it's not that the animals are somehow independent of creation. They are the very creation Allah has made them musakhar to us, subservient to us. So now what do we see? Well, slaughtering animals is a belief of ours. It's a belief of ours because it's a worldview that we hold. And if we come across someone who's, let's say, a vegetarian and doesn't believe in that worldview, we can say, you know what, I understand why you might take that view. It's not a view that's open to debate with them, Because why? They don't have the same framework as what you're thinking about. That's okay. So when we speak to people who come with different ideas of how to live their life, it doesn't make sense to speak with them at the level of the specifics of the things that they're doing. It's really a question that has to go back to, what are you living your life for? If you think that your life is just here and it's just to do the best that you can for yourself, then that's a worldview that you've adopted, and there are consequences for that. But if you think like we do, that there's a worldview and that's been given to us by Allah, and the fact that He tells us how we're meant to live our lives to achieve the purposes and the goals set out by that worldview, then that's something else. And that's a very important sort of way of looking at the world. It will save us a lot of trouble looking at people who are doing all manner of different things, especially in the modern world today, that sometimes we think are, harmful to religion, harmful to deen. But you have to always look at it from these foundational points, not at the specifics that you're finding in front of you, right? And unfortunately, yes, I know, sometimes Muslims will start saying things like that, but that's because of a weakness of our understanding of our tradition. Not because the tradition is somehow unsure. No. The health of any civilization always depends on its level of scholars. And the health of our people, Muslims, depends on the strength of the scholarship that we have. And hence it comes back to that time I say, again and again and again, the focus on developing scholars and scholarship. So tabarakallah, I'll stop here for now.